We're pressing on in our look at mystery, and this morning we're going to camp out on Psalm 75:1 and listen for what the Spirit would say to us in this particular verse. We give thanks to you, O God. We give thanks, for your wondrous works declare that your name is near. And I want to just start out by taking a look at the few major terms in this verse, beginning with give thanks. So give thanks is a word that has two parts to it. The first is to recognize. To recognize. And of course, the idea behind that is you can't give thanks for what you don't see, for what you don't know is there. So giving thanks begins with recognition. And then the second part of that is to recognize and declare or confess outwardly. To declare or confess outwardly. We'll come back to that in just a little bit. But this is what Scripture is talking about here when it says, we give thanks to you. And then let's take a look at these words. Your wondrous works declare. A wondrous or wonderful work in Scripture is one in which God unveils himself. A wondrous or wonderful work in Scripture is one in which God unveils himself. The unveiling is what makes the act wondrous. Not that the act is dazzling or out of the ordinary. You hear that? The unveiling is what makes the act wondrous. Not that the act is dazzling or out of the ordinary. And so we read through Scripture, we reflect on the time when Israel is being delivered from Egypt and God parts the Red Sea. And we think of that as a wondrous act, and we think it is because it's such an act that is so out of the ordinary. It's astonishing. And we think that's what makes it wondrous. But for Scripture, that is not what makes it wondrous. The key point of the Exodus, the parting of the Red Sea, is it is telling the people of Israel something about who God is. And you see this in the chapters that immediately follow. So in the rest of Exodus 16, you see that Israel crosses the Red Sea, they go into the wilderness area, and they come to a place where there is water and they're thirsty, but there's something corrupt about the water. It's undrinkable. And so they start complaining. God, why would you let them? God, this is not good. I can't have this. You don't understand my needs, God. And so forth. And God gives them a method to cleanse the water. That wondrous act of cleansing the water is meant to tell them something about the sort of God that he is, and that God has come to them in that act. But just a little bit longer, I'm hungry. Are we there yet? Right. I'm hungry. And they start complaining again against God. And this repeats itself. You remember the story. It repeats itself over and over again. And what Scripture says to us is that, and this is over in Exodus 33, what Scripture says to us is we should have known who God was by what God did. And you should have been able to see who God was, and that when you got to this place where the water was bitter or there wasn't food, what you should have known is not that God is this great power that can split the seas, but that God is the God who takes care of his people because he loves them. And there is nothing, no situation you get into that God will not provide for you. That's the kind of God you have. So this is what we mean when we say that the unveiling is what makes the act wondrous, not that the act is dazzling or out of the ordinary. If you miss the unveiling, it's no longer a wondrous act. Go ahead, Brian.
But it can be, though, I feel like. It doesn't exclude from the rule, because I feel like sometimes the unveiling is dazzling if you really think about it.
It can be,
but it
doesn't have to be. It's not what makes it wondrous. Okay, that's the key term. Yeah, that's the key term. All right, so wondrous works declare, and then we would say, well, declare what? Declare that your name is near. In Scripture, God's name is not just information about God, nor is it merely a label so that we know what to call him. It is God as he makes himself known. It is God as he makes himself known in relation to us. That is God's name. God's name is God as he makes himself known in relation to us. So it isn't something that God does that has no relation to us. God's name is about who he is in relation to us. That's his name. And so, God's name is the work of mystery. It is God unveiling himself, revealing himself. Declare that your name is near. Near may be translated intimately close. Intimately close. Or drawing near. Drawing near. So God's works are not merely divine displays of power to amaze us. They are a means by which he unveils himself to us, draws close to us, and offers his loving communion to us. Now let me say that all as one sentence. God's works are not merely divine displays of power to amaze us. They are means by which he unveils himself to us, draws close to us, and offers his loving communion to us. That is what God's wondrous works are. In other words, again, God's works are acts of his radiant mystery. God's works are acts of his radiant mystery. So you can imagine how much of life and how much of God we miss out on when we do not recognize the mystery of life, when we do not live life as mystery. All right, with those things in mind, I want to press on to these next 4 quotes. One of them is from G.K. Chesterton, and the rest are from the Hebrew Scriptures. So let's look at Chesterton first, all right? The function of imagination, we'll talk more about that in a second, the word imagination. The function of imagination is not to make strange things settled so much as to make settled things strange. Not so much to make wonders facts as to make facts wonders. This is the kind of writing Chesterton does all the time. I love him. Remember this. We've spoken of imagination before, so let me remind you. Imagination is an aspect of perception. Imagination is not primarily about making up what isn't true. It isn't primarily about fantasy. Imagination is the faculty that makes it possible for us to see the meaning in things. Imagination is our God-given faculty that makes it possible for us to see the meaning in things and how they connect. All right? And this is why, parenthetically, scientists, Einstein famously says this, that scientists, the best scientists are those with the most creative imaginations. Because they're the ones who come upon these facts, and now they have to imagine, how do these disparate facts actually fit together? And what is the meaning of them that they fit together? That's not a work of logic, that's a work of imagination. All right, so we've done Chesterton things, and we've related and linked his word imagination. We could just as easily say the word perception, but I think imagination is helpful to retain in this. Now let's look at Psalm 104, 14 and 15. You cause the grass to grow for the cattle, and plants for people to cultivate, to bring forth food from the earth, and wine to gladden the human heart, oil to make the face shine, and bread to strengthen the human heart. Psalm 145, 15 and 16. The eyes of all look expectantly to you, and you give them their food in due season. You open your hand and gratify the pleasure of every living thing. So living things have this capacity to be pleased with something. God not only supplies that faculty, that they can be pleased by things, God also supplies the thing that pleases them. Both come from God. Both are acts or works of God. And then Daniel 5:23. You have praised the gods of silver and gold and bronze, iron, wood, and stone, which do not see or hear or know, but the God in whose power is your very breath, and to whom belong all your ways, you have not honored. All right. So our question is, how might the above quotes relate to our scripture this morning, given the definitions and understandings that we started off with? Start with Chesterton. How does that relate to Psalm 75:1?
We participate in his wondrous works.
We participate in his wondrous works. And one of the ways that we participate is it starts the psalm off. Give thanks. But in order To give thanks, notice we have to recognize what's going on. We have to perceive. We have to be able to imagine past the brute fact of the event to what is behind it, what is underlying it, what is God unveiling about himself through it. The brute fact is not the issue. It takes perception to see that it is wondrous. Right? Do we see that? So we need to be able to perceive the wondrous in life. And this then brings us to our next quotes, because most of us live pretty much quotidian lives. That means everyday lives, right? We live everyday lives with just everyday occurrences. Most often we don't come to a lake and it just splits for us. Most often we're not driving down the road and then there is this miraculous vision. That there's not a lot of really great things in that sense that happen. So for what do we have to be thankful? What is there to recognize? Where are the wondrous works for us? And that's exactly what these three scriptures from the Hebrew scriptures say. So take a look at those.
Which ones?
All of the three scriptures that are included there. You cause the grass to grow. Why is grass growing?
He's our provider.
For the cattle.
He's our provider, but why is grass growing?
For the
Feed
cattle.
the cattle.
His
He
life
causes-
is in that.
God is causing the grass. No, we know the laws of physics. We know horticulture. We know those things. Well, who is it that's upholding all of that?
God.
Right?
So we recognize that God is the one that causes the grass to grow.
Yes. So grass, go ahead.
To me, that's dazzling. I mean, that's what imagination, when you really think about it. When at the beginning, it's saying it's not, not an act of dazzling or out of the ordinary. And yeah, it can be true too, a lot of things. But when you really use your imagination to think about,
That's right, right.
Since the beginning of time, what is sustaining? Grass is not only why is it green. I mean, there's so many factors. Photosynthesis, like
Yeah.
a lot of things happen, and just in nature, and that alone is wondrous.
It is.
Just observing nature and seeing God in it.
That's the part that makes it wondrous. God is unveiling himself, drawing near to you, offering communion to you in grass that grows. Right? Amazing. And not only that, he's given us plants to cultivate for several reasons, right? So that we can have food, so that we can have wine. God says it's a good thing. So that we can use oil to make our faces shine. It was important then, right? To bring bread, to make bread. All of this, and notice what bread is for. It's not just so that your body runs, it's to strengthen your heart. The part of you that is given to perception. Scripture is making this connection for us. These are wondrous works. How often do we think of them that way? Every now and then? Maybe. But most of the time we just pass grass. I said pass grass. and we just think, oh look, there's grass. If we even notice it at all. Yeah, and then it's a nuisance. And then it's a nuisance. Right? Or it's something we do so that we make it look the way we want it to. None of that's talking about God. None of that is God unveiling himself to draw near to us so as he might include us in his loving communion. These are meant to be moments of intimacy. That's the word near. Getting food, our breathing. We've said this kind of thing before, but we need to see it now in the context. This is what Scripture is telling us. This is the mystery we live in. When we miss these things, this is when we are not living the mystery that life is. And this is why life seems to be so disenchanted. It's why we can look around at the world and just become completely nonplussed by it or discouraged by it. Because what we are drawn to are all of the bad things that people are doing or the bad things that happen. And listen, every moment where things are working as they are so far outweighs the bad things that happen. But none of those matter to us because we don't know that they're wondrous works. And throughout our day, we are not recognizing that God is drawing near every time we take a breath. And he's pulling us into intimacy with himself every time our heart beats. Because all the ways, the Scripture says, all the ways come from his hand. You're just digesting food. You're not bothering anybody. And God is drawing near. And you couldn't care less. Why? Not because you're hardened, but because you don't recognize that's what's going on. Facts become wonders when we come to perceive God unveiling himself in them. Facts become wonders when we come to perceive God unveiling himself in them. And when we perceive that, we give thanks. Wonder is not added to the breath or the bread from the outside. The wonder was there all along. At one point we didn't perceive it, at another we did. But it was there all along. So come to this next question. Who is God unveiling himself to be in the wondrous works mentioned in the scripture verses above?
Intimately connected with us, I guess.
That's one of the things. He's intimately connected with us. What else is he showing about himself?
Provider.
He's a provider in all ways. What about, well, yeah, he provided the plant, I'm keeping with the scripture, so that we can make bread. But I'm the one that harvested. I planted it. I harvested it. I'm the one that ground things up. I'm the one that put the stuff in the oven. So it sounds to me like I'm doing this.
Without him, we can do nothing.
Without him, we can do nothing. Who is it that provided and provides continually a brain that can understand what you do to make bread?
And our every breath.
And our every breath. And the beating of your heart. Who is it that is supplying life to you every moment and the strength to move your arms, to move your eyes, all of the rest? If you think about everything that's going on, that is God intimately with you. And all we can think of when we want to know if God is near is, can I feel something? Can I please just feel something? And our entire life is a wasteland to us at those times. Because everything about us and our surrounding is God in a wondrous act unveiling himself for intimacy with us.
It says you open your hand and gratify the pleasure of every living thing.
Exactly
That's
right.
amazing. So it's
Exactly
not just,
right.
you know, giving us bread because we're hungry. I mean, the pleasure of every living thing. I mean,
Right.
not just needs, but things that we desire that are good too, right? That's what it's talking about. Right?
Exactly right. And that's why there's a right way to pleasure and a wrong way to pleasure. The wrong way to pleasure is one in which God is not unveiled in what you're doing. And there are plenty of ways in which we wrongly engage pleasure as an end in itself. Or pleasure because it makes me feel good, and by golly, what's that phrase? I'm smart, yeah.
People like
People like me, and I deserve to feel good. Right? And in that, you see, the pleasure isn't there to join communion with God. The pleasure is there for a life apart from God. That's what we do to pleasure. And that's why the pleasure never ends up completely satisfying us, fulfilling us. Because the whole point is to be brought to God, for God to unveil himself to us, for us to enter into communion with him, because the mystery is communion with God. The mystery is not information. The mystery is not fat bites. The mystery is life in communion with God, which gives everything its proper place and meaning, and from which we can then understand life as it really is. Those connections are tremendously important. So revelation isn't given just to give us information about God. Revelation is given so that we might know, in a biblical sense, know God, that we might participate in his communion of love, that we might participate in his goodness and his kindness and his beauty. So as you look through these scriptures and as you relate them to your daily life, there is so much that God is unveiling about himself. And the more you reflect on that, the more he unveils to you. Think about the kind of God that would, to go into your point, Rob, would create a capacity for kindness, for pleasure rather, knowing that the only reason he's doing it is because it gives you pleasure. And then giving you those very things that satisfy, gratify the pleasure. What kind of God does that? He must be incredibly kind. He must love you so much. And that love must want to beautify your way of living so much. And he must be so generous that he does it all day long, every day. And he must be so faithful that he continues doing it when you completely take it for granted. And he must be so understanding when you say, yeah, you give me that, but this is what I need. And if I don't get what I need, then, oh my gosh, life isn't worth living. And all of that is determined by an identity we have assumed because we're deceived, because we don't live the mystery. Think about this.
Something that confuses me is it says wine to gladden the human heart, but then it also says do not be drunk with wine, for this is dissipation. So I don't know where you draw the line.
Drunkenness is where you draw the line.
Okay.
Straightforward. So according to our scripture this morning, what leads us to be thankful?
The Lord provides for us. I mean, provided the food in which we eat months in advance. I mean, well, really, before time. I mean, things were already, the design of creation was already set for it to sustain maybe, even just the little things, you know.
Yeah. He gives the works all the time, but what makes thanks possible? That you're right, the works are there, but there's another aspect.
Breath in our lungs to keep
Look at the word thankful.
Perceiving the revelation
You've got to recognize it.
of God in all things.
You must perceive it. You must give yourself to perceive it. There is a way of life. Remember when Jesus gives the parables? And so many of them are just about natural occurrences going on in life. And he calls your attention to that. The Father loves you so much. And then he says, consider the birds. If you consider the birds and open yourself to them, you might recognize that God is unveiling something about himself in them. Not one of those falls to the ground without your Father knowing it. He knows every hair on your head. Consider the lilies of the field. Those aren't just metaphors that we make up. Those are wondrous works in which God is unveiling himself and drawing near to us, if only we would recognize it for what it is. And this is why, we've gone over this many times, this is why the key factor in our development as humans is the development of our perception. This is why we are constantly having to be accustomed to see the world as mystery, because that's the world as it really is. It isn't simply this place that God fills with facts. Creation itself is an act of mystery. So we've got to recognize it, and then we've got to declare it. Why is declaring it important? Why is it confessing it outwardly? Why is that important?
Because you're actively participating with it.
Yes. Recognizing it begins to participate with it. Giving yourself to perceive it is opening yourself to the mystery. It's recognizing I live in a world of mystery. Declaring it is participating in the mystery, and for a couple of reasons. Because now you can't say about whatever it is you're thankful for that it's just a thing. A tree's just a tree. Grass is just grass. If you are thankful for it, then when you think of it, you must say, and that is God in the act of loving me. That is God in the act of being kind to me. And I participate in that by receiving it as God being kind to me. This is so important when we look back on our lives. Please hear me. This is so important when we look back on our lives and we look to trauma that we have lived through and hard times that we have lived through. Most of us have already interpreted those or had those events interpreted to us. So when we think of them, they are not God unveiling himself to us. Well, I was beaten as a child. How in the world is that God unveiling himself to us? No, that isn't. But the presence of God in the midst of it. He was there. He is there. And that's not the message this morning. I'm using that as an example. But we've already had that interpreted to us by a fallen world and by the evil one who's in charge of the fallen world. We've learned to see that entirely deceptive. God was nowhere around. I was left all on my own. And who I am as a person was up for grabs then. And when we look back on it, that's the story we tell ourselves. And that's the story we tell other people too. I was a kid and this happened to me and this happened to me, and that was the meaning of those things. That was the meaning of those things? I think the meaning of those things really lies in you going back and letting God unveil himself in the midst of it. And if you do that, and you see how God is drawing near to you in those events, then whenever you talk about that to other people, you can't just say, I went through this really hard time, and therefore I can be excused, or therefore you can see why I'm so messed up. And there is a modicum of truth in that. There is. I'm not discounting that. But that has to be brought before the Lord too, yeah? My point is this: declaring it means this is my interpretation of that forever now. This is how I interpret that to myself. And when I talk about it to other people, this is how I interpret it. So I'm telling somebody my story, and I'm telling them about the things that were hard for me. And I'm just letting them know these things were going on. If I stop there, then I'm participating in the lie again. Because I'm not saying what I'm thankful for that God is in that. All I'm doing is stopping short of what my false identity was able to determine of that. So every time I tell that story and somebody says, gosh, I'm really sorry that happened to you, that's appropriate. But then we go on to say, listen, I appreciate that. I'm thankful that you're so kind to empathize with me, but you've got to understand God was there. And the reality is that this is who God is bringing me to be in the midst of that, and because of that. And so that's not what absolutely cripples my life. That's where I found the presence of God, who gives me the ability to walk when I was crippled, to live and flourish where the enemy meant to cut me down. Now you have something to be thankful for, right? Now you're declaring thanks. You're grateful for God's wondrous works, for his drawing near to you in your suffering. So that as, again, 2 Corinthians 4 says that it's part of our scripture memory, right? There is a glory we are living and becoming that far outweighs the suffering. And that happens when we look at what can't be seen instead of what can. When we look at what can't be seen, what we're looking at are the wondrous works of God. Do you see this?
It's so free for those who live as a victim.
Absolutely right.
Want to protect victimhood, I don't get it, but it should be free.
It is. The difficulty, I think, is you're having to step into a new identity, and who you have determined yourself to be, what you have counted on to define you and give you pleasure and all of these things, the answers to problems that you thought you had, you've become married to these. You've identified who you are with these. If I don't get these, my life is hell. And that sets me free then to disobey God. Not in the sense of I'm going to throw it in God's face, but in the sense of I'm going to live apart from communion because I know that's what I need. No, you don't. Giving thanks is recognizing the wondrous works to be God unveiling himself and drawing you into intimacy with him so that you may flourish in that life. And if you don't declare it, if you just want to use it to make yourself feel good in the moment, you're not giving thanks. Do you see the difference? And the fact is, the more you do this, the more you begin to see this. The more you participate in mystery, the more the mystery is unveiled. I think we've done enough. Yeah. Any closing comments or questions?
I guess it's more wondrous that you'll never understand the mystery, really.
You can't. It's yes and no, right?
Yeah.
We never come to the bottom of the mystery.
Right.
So when I lived in Ormond Beach, I went out and I swam in the ocean every day of my life.
Yeah.
So I knew what the ocean was, I just didn't know its depths. The same thing is true here. We know communion with God, but because God is eternal and inexhaustible, there's always more to know. When we think of the mystery as information, that's when we don't understand the mystery. The mystery is the depth of love and communion that we have with God and the flourishing of life that comes from that. That is inexhaustible, and it will be so for us throughout eternity.
Yeah, it's impossible because I think all the way to the tippy top, God has to be contained in a sphere or something. If you go all the way to the tippy top,
Yeah,
then even then,
there is no top.
There's no top. And understanding that is, yeah.
Yeah, that's wild, isn't it?
Yeah,
That's wild.
it's mind-bending.
It is. All right. So in just a few moments, we're going to be engaging in the mystery of communion, the bread and the cup that are more than just the bread and the cup. They are means by which God is unveiling himself to us. I think it may be helpful to reflect on how is God unveiling himself to us in the bread and the cup, and then come and take from communion.